In 1969, a group of astronauts changed the world. They walked on the moon.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
In 1972, our journey ended. We've never been back. 2010 begins a year of change. Private companies are working on next-generation spaceships. Governments are looking to go back to the moon and on to Mars. It's time to look up and dream again. It's time to push humans into the cosmos. It's time to educate and engage the planet. It's time for Spacevidcast.
This is Spacevidcast 3.33 for Friday, October 8th, 2010. My name is Benjamin Higginbotham. With me, as always, the beautiful, lovely, wonderful, and talented Carrie Ann Higginbotham will be your hosts for this evening. And what an evening we have got. Let me think. We missed last week's show, and during that time, basically, we found a planet that's an Earth-like planet, we think.
You know, we should miss more shows.
Yeah, I mean, just, major scientific discoveries. And for this week, actually, it's the anniversary of LCROSS. It feels like it just happened last month. For those who don't remember, that was the mission where we bombed the moon. Okay, well, whatever. That's at least that's how the media had it coming out. And we are joined on both coasts by some of the LCROSS team. We're joined both on the West Coast by...
Oh, I actually closed that.
Really? I was like, be prepared for this.
I know.
Get ready to go.
So sorry.
We're joined on the East Coast by Emory Stagmer. Hopefully I still pronounced that correctly. And on the West Coast by...
We've got Jim Munger, Craig Elder, and Jose Cabinallas.
And Vax, just to help us out, repasted it in my iPad. Hey guys, welcome to Spacevidcast. Thank you for joining us.
Glad to be here.
So let's start off with, for those who don't remember, what was LRO and what was LCROSS? What was that mission a year ago? Let's start with the hardware guys on the West Coast.
All right, I'm Craig Elder. I was the electrical lead during the design and development process. The LRO spacecraft, Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, was the moon's version of the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, intended to map out lunar resources in many different spectra, laser altimeter, surface penetrating radar, optical camera, all sorts of good stuff. Trouble was, it was a little too big for its initial rocket. When it switched to the next biggest rocket, the Atlas V, there was an extra 1,000 kilograms of throw weight headed towards the moon. Hence was born LCROSS back in February of 2006. Shall I keep going, Ben?
Oh yeah, no, keep going. We're all about all about you guys.
All right. Well, not to bore your audience, but the proposal was actually pretty entertaining. There were 19 different teams, government industry teams, competing for this one slot. How to use the 1,000 kilograms headed to the moon. There were little rovers. There were some guys in Texas, I think, had a drill that would try to drill down through to try to find water. Along comes the NASA Ames Northrop Grumman team, and we decided to cheat. We said, gee, in addition to the 1,000 kilograms that we want, there's this 2,000 kilogram Centaur upper stage rocket that's just going to be space junk if we don't do something with it. How about we use that as a kinetic impactor? Turned out to be Jose has the paper version.
And props. We have props.
Yeah, this model is actually more important than you realize.
Yeah, we'll get into the importance of that in a little bit.
This part right here is the stage, and this part right here is the LCROSS.
Part of the magic of
That's the business in there.
LCROSS beating out the other 18 candidates was that we figured out a way not only to cheat on the mass that we were carrying, but we also figured out that we could turn a piece of the Centaur's auxiliary structure, the secondary payload adapter ring, we figured out that we could turn that into a free-flying camera platform. Not only to guide the spacecraft into the Cabinallas crater, but also then to observe the impact and then create a second crater up there.
And you guys were pretty much looking for water, correct?
Yes.
Very much so. Actually, ice, because at 395 degrees Fahrenheit below zero, it's not really water at that point.
Fair enough.
We were going to a place where there are places on the north and south pole of the moon that never get sunlight in the craters. And that's where they had these radar signatures that looked kind of like ice. And that's where they wanted to go and drop something in there and see what they could bring up.
And talk to me about Impact Day, because you guys, you go there and then there was a stage SEP, and you send down the impactor first, right? Because you're blowing a crater in the moon, and then you're getting all the ejections going, and then you're sending LCROSS down after it to get the readings, right?
Right.
So how did that all go?
Actually, it went exactly as planned. The stage itself separated the. Let's see, where is it? That part of it right there. The stage itself separated just perfectly, and after it happened, they turned the cameras on the spacecraft and swung the spacecraft around, and all of a sudden on the TV screens that are beamed down from orbit, you're seeing this little image of the rocket stage drifting away, and if you look real closely at it, you can see in the shadows, various things that had been troubling us, like the batteries that had sprayed on us and all sorts of other stuff like that, which was really just fascinating and absolutely wonderful, because that was the one thing that we couldn't rehearse and the one thing we couldn't plan for. And it was the one thing that had to work, or else we were going to have to go to the backup plan real quick, which didn't involve us doing much of anything past that point.
Wait, what was the back? You had a backup plan? How do you have a backup plan to impacting the moon? The backup plan is don't hit the moon? What?
No, actually, the backup plan is the spacecraft just carries the stage and crashes along with it, and you have to kind of look at it from other things. You can't get the real good close-up pictures that we got.
Our success criteria was crashing into the moon and discovering water, not necessarily taking the pictures ourselves.
So you set your bar really low, right? What are we going to do?
What?
We're going to crash into the moon. That's pretty easy. We don't
Oh,
need
no.
That was the minimum set.
It's better than that, because the way that they structured the mission, the whole idea was that it was supposed to be cheap enough that it could fail. And we had to, as we got further into it, we were kind of saying, that really is not a good guiding theory for how you're going to build and fly the spacecraft. So we started taking it a lot more serious as time went on.
We were Class D when we started out, and then we weren't Class D anymore by the time we started getting close to the moon.
Yeah.
I'm going to pop over to the East Coast for a second and talk to Emory, because Emory, you've talked to us about this before, about the different classifications of missions and what they mean and how LCROSS was classified. Can you kind of recap what all that means and why it was important?
Yeah, Class D essentially means that there's a significant possibility that you will not be able to meet your mission criteria. But because it's risky and worthwhile doing, you might want to go ahead and take the risk and try and do it anyhow. So this was about as low-cost a mission as you can do and actually fly a satellite. So NASA said, we're going to take that risk. We're going to go ahead and try and do it.
Awesome. And it was...
With very low expectations.
Well, yeah, which I do still think is funny, because I realize it's very hard. This is rocket science, but crash that thing into the moon. Oh, that's not going to work.
No, but do it anyway. Go ahead and try.
I do it in 24 months, and
It's better than that, because as time went on, when we first started this mission, there were a number of folks that we talked to in NASA who said it won't work. And as time went on, there was a piece of the project that we had which was dedicated to having a set of just aluminum boxes full of sand available to bolt on in place of the electronics if we couldn't make the schedule. And so we went all the way down to the point where we just were about ready to go into the environmental test chambers before they finally canceled that, because there was concerns on the part of everybody, and we weren't immune to it. We had a certain amount of fear ourselves as time went on, that this was very aggressive scheduling and this was a very aggressive program, and the opportunity was there for us to fail at many points along the way.
It's like a double dog dare.
Yeah.
You know, let's go back a little ways, because this was not a flawless mission. It's not like you launched and you just made it there and everything went as planned. There were a few hurdles along the way. Can you describe a few of those?
Sure. Okay, here's our spacecraft, and our first problem. Hold it up to the camera here.
Higher.
This is, by the way, for everyone watching, this is highly technical CGI.
It is.
Right now. Very expensive animations.
We used this model, okay? So we had problems with the thrusters, okay? And they were running cold. The thermostats weren't turning on and weren't keeping them warm. So we figured, okay, how do we get these warm? So I picked up the model, literally started looking at it, and I go, you know, if I tilt it toward the sun, I can get sun on the thrusters back there, and we can keep the thrusters warm. And that's where we started. And once we figured that out, we got the mass properties guys, and we got all the designers in there and had them do CAD pictures, and started the real technical ball rolling. Okay, and slowly but surely we had to slowly work and violate a bunch of limitations and constraints until we understood the thermal. But we started with the cardboard model and figuring out that we could roll it into the sun. So that was the first hurdle.
Is that the actual model you looked at when you were trying to figure it out?
This one was my personal model. The model itself goes back to our space park days when we knew that all of our great spacecraft had a paper model that the public could punch out and glue together. It was after midnight. Our mechanical lead, Dean Daly, and I were sitting around thinking, man, we really should come up with a model. So we figured out a little PowerPoint, drew some cylinders and squares and cut it out. And soon that PowerPoint started being distributed. Before too long, we figured we could add another page rolled up in a cylinder. That could be the Centaur. And in about a week, we were distributing PowerPoint versions. Oh, it only took you like about 8 or 12 hours to cut out and glue together. Our art department at Northrop got a hold of it and did a pre-cut, die-cast, pre-folded.
Shiny paper.
Shiny paper. And now any second grader can put about 3/4 of it together in an hour, and you need a PhD in astrophysics to get the final part done.
Only 8 or
I
12
guarantee
hours.
you there are a lot of these things sitting in bookcases all over Southern California that have never been cut out and built.
They're just flat. They just look like it.
Oh, now I totally want to
For
find
sure.
one.
Well, that, and you probably could have even made it out of Legos with that amount of time and effort put into it.
I actually talked to somebody about getting a Lego kit of the spacecraft and just having
so cool.
a bag so you could put it together, but it just costs too much.
Yeah.
No, actually, it would be brilliant, because what's the best part of Legos? You get the Legos, then all you have to do is when you're done with it, you throw it at a wall. And be like, it's like a real thing.
5,600 miles per hour.
Now, they were experimenting with other LCROSS toys, and one of my favorites was, I don't know if Craig has it, but we were shooting a big little Nerf projectile that kind of looked like LCROSS at a target.
Yeah, we had a glass wall in our bay where we put
that's right. We had the
craters of the moon.
The crater of the moon map up, and people could come in with a suction cup gun and
Now,
pick out which crater they wanted to shoot at, and then see if they could hit it.
Now, we looked at this as mission simulations.
Yes, I love it.
Now you can get your own set, but the darts are only $79 million a piece.
All right, so that was your first challenge. The thrusters were getting too cold, then what?
Continue. So
Yeah, go ahead.
we had other fun anomalies where the
Centaur leak?
so the Centaur wasn't quite empty. Okay, so the rocket down here had stuff left over in it. Okay, so down around here somewhere, if I can hold it up high enough.
There you go.
We had these valves that would spew out stuff every once in a while because it had fuel, and the spacecraft would literally burp. So I'd be watching the terminal, all of a sudden the rates would just go nuts, and I had all this gyration going on, and we looked at it for a bit, and it was a burp. So, and the burps on occasion weren't bad, but we noticed that it was kind of spewing on a regular basis and putting just a little bit of torque into the spacecraft all the time. So we had to adjust the ACS modes to take care of that.
It's not a term that I normally hear rocket scientists using. What's wrong with the rocket? It's burping. I don't know. It has gas.
Little gas.
I can't.
Yeah.
Oh,
I had kids. I know the deal.
It was burping and it was spewing.
Just had bad indigestion.
It was causing us indigestion. I'll say that.
Were there any other MacGyver moments that you guys had where you're just like, how are we? All right, we've got a rubber band, a piece of tape, and a stick. How can we use these to fix this and make the mission still a success?
When we lost our fuel, we pull out the rubber bands and the sticks and
Yeah.
tried to put things together, and we managed to do that.
That was Plan C.
But you guys did, right? I mean,
Yep.
the mission was a success. You slammed into the moon. But I'm going to give you one little gripe, and that was the beautiful CGI animations that we saw from multiple cameras, which, I don't know where these cameras were going to be on. They look like that, right? Where you got like the moon and this 500-mile thing of water
Oh, I
coming
haven't
up.
seen that one. That's cool. Can I give it
Isn't that
those?
So there was this great, you hit it with the second stage, and then it came up, and there was just, and then we're watching it live, and we're all like, all right, impact.
Well, and I think
Well,
somewhere
we were
along the line,
seeing
somebody
the
said
same
something,
videos.
you'd be able to see the impact from Earth with a relatively low-grade binoculars or something along
And we
those
could even
lines.
see it, like, from space.
I'll take this one if I may. Yeah.
Knock yourself out.
Please.
Keep in mind that we did deliver 7.2 gigajoules of kinetic energy into an area the size of your dining room. And that is a phenomenal amount of energy. And it did create, if you were standing anywhere nearby, you would have seen a plume that looked a lot like the video in shape and intensity. However, it was 3 kilometers down below the rim of a very steep crater wall.
Very steep, dark
Yeah.
crater wall.
About 2 weeks before impact, we had our project scientists had a dilemma they had to resolve, which was, do we go for an impact in Cabinallas A, which has very low rims and would be a spectacular view from Earth, or do we switch to a place that is more likely to contain the frozen ice that we're looking to find, which was Cabinallas proper? And I, for one, believe that the science team made the right decision.
Well, the other thing is that as time went on, they were looking at data that was coming down from LRO and coming down from the Japanese and the Indian spacecraft. And I don't know if they had any Chang'e data from the Chinese or not, but they constantly were getting updated information, and especially as LRO had been up there and flying, they went through a very short activation cycle to get their instruments online before they had a chance to do all their full calibrations to be able to say, this is a good place to crash LCROSS into the moon. And so those decisions were driving them in terms of the science, and what happened at the end was, like Craig said, the science overcame the video. And so we ended up dropping this thing down in a hole, and not as much stuff came up above the crater rim to be illuminated by the sun as they originally thought it was going to.
But lots and lots of water, as I understand it. I mean, there was the press briefing after where they made the big dramatic thing with the things with water.
Buckets and, yeah.
Yep.
It was wetter where we landed in the crater than it is on some places of the surface of the Earth.
That's cool. Let's pop back over to the East Coast for a moment, because I've been ignoring Emory, and I'm like that, because I'm like, we know Vax, yeah. But Vax, tell us about some of the fun stuff that happened on the software side during the mission. Did you have any challenges during the LCROSS mission itself?
We had a couple. They did a lot of changes to some of the onboard parameters, and so there was a lot of back and forth on trying to get new information uploaded to the spacecraft. There was a lot of challenges in that, especially after we had the propellant loss in August. Our ACS guys attitude control software guys had to figure out essentially a whole new way to fly the spacecraft, and they did it in, Craig, like 2 weeks? It was a really phenomenally short period of time. They basically rewrote.
They had the first patches done in like a day, and then
Yeah, it was amazing. They basically, changed all the configurations on how the entire spacecraft was flown, and by the time we were done, it was actually more efficient in the worst case than it was in the best case beforehand. So it was pretty amazing.
teaspoons of fuel a day at the end.
Right. And that was, part of that was driven by the fact that we didn't have a lot of money and we didn't have a lot of time. So before launch, we took a look at what we had to do in terms of how much fuel was on board the spacecraft. And we really designed the thing to sort of a minimum level of performance to be able to make sure that we crashed into the moon. And that worked real fine until we almost ran out of gas, and then we had to get a little more creative.
Now, you're kind of a skunkworks project. You're just kind of a, I don't want to say under the radar, but certainly a, hey, we want to do payload too. We can do this cool stuff. And I got to believe it's a smaller group. I mean, it was, we were talking in pre-show, it was no more than about 100 people on the whole program. Is that correct?
It's actually the peak. The average was 46 heads over the 3 years of the program. And the core team, like once we delivered the spacecraft to NASA and got into mission operation, generally we had 12, 15 essential heads at Northrop, and about the same number at NASA.
About the same.
Yeah, about the same.
We had one in Berkeley.
Yeah. One of our engineers went off to get his graduate degree, and because of the delays in the launch, the two lined up on top of each other. So he'd go to class, then he'd drive down to Ames Research Center from Berkeley and sit on console for his shift during a contact, and he'd go back up and take his classes again.
What was even better than that, we had an anomaly, and he's in class. Okay, so I'm texting him while he's in class saying, Matt, what do we do here? You know, and I'm sending him little pictures and stuff, and he's texting me back in class. You need to do this, and you need to do that, and you do that. It'd be great.
Wouldn't it be awesome if the teachers...
We had fun with Matt.
Wouldn't it be awesome if the teacher stopped him and was like, what are you doing? He's like, oh, I'm sorry. We're sending something to the moon, and I just need to... hang on a second. I'm working with some stuff on the moon. I'll be right back.
Man.
I just need
to...
He just had his computer open like he was typing away, and he did it. We weren't always nice to Matt, though, because I was the leader of the mission ops organization, and I made sure to feed my people really well, and the NASA people didn't catch on to that early on. They managed to change, so they were making sure if the people had to be there 24/7, they were feeding them well while they were in the operations room. So when Matt transitioned to Berkeley and then he was going to NASA, well, at that time they weren't feeding them very well. So Matt was a real stickler for bacon and eggs, right? So we took a picture of the bacon and eggs tray from the cafeteria, and we would fax that to him about every 15 minutes. Or text it to him every 15 minutes, so it kept popping up on his display.
Oh my God, funny.
I have one other Berkeley story. That the day of the anomaly, we were having trouble getting a hold of Matt because it was about 5 in the morning, and my son's a sophomore up at Berkeley, and I called my son, get him out of bed, and say, ride your bike over to Matt's house, get him on the line, and sure enough, we got Matt. By about 8:30.
Yeah, he came online right after I got in. They called me at home, and my cell phone went off in the other room, and I woke up about a half an hour later. My wife said, "Oh, your cell phone went off." So I went in and picked it up, and I dial in. It's Craig, and I call Craig, and Craig says, "We had an anomaly, and we almost ran out of fuel." And I was thinking to myself, because we're getting close to the impact and close to the critical time of flight, that this is one of those tests. And I said, "Was this a test?" No, this is not a test. Next thing I know, I'm jumping into some clothes and heading for work.
During the anomaly, I was the lead systems engineer, the lead technical specialist for the spacecraft. And Eric, who's not unfortunately here tonight, was my second. So between the two of us, one was on shift all the time. And Eric went on camping, and all of a sudden we have this anomaly, and Eric is nowhere to be found. We texted him, we called his phone. So for days, he is unavailable. So I'm like living there during the anomaly, going home for maybe 2 or 3 hours and coming back. And when Eric finally shows up, he must have had 100 nasty grams from me on his computer. He comes rushing in, and first thing I said to him was, when the going gets tough, the tough go camping.
And in the middle of all of this, my wife and I took off for a 2-week tour of Turkey. So we come back, and one of the things we picked up while we were over there was everywhere you go in Turkey, there are these glass eyes, and they're protection against the evil eye. And so I made sure to bring back 2 big ones, and we hung one down in the control room in Redondo Beach, and we shipped another one up for the flight control deck at Ames, just to make sure we had something looking over our shoulder for the rest of the flight.
Almost like the Eye of Mordor, watching you at all times.
But the good kind.
Not quite as scary, but yeah.
I see you. So, I mean, the point I was making earlier was you guys are kind of a small group, and you kind of went into it a little bit on your own, but I was wondering what some of your best pranks were, and you got into a few of them, but what would you, because I have to believe you guys are pranking each other and just having a fun time with this, right? Because you're a skunk work project. It's a, you know, let's just make this thing go. It's a tighter knit team. Of the things you can talk about on the air, that's, you know, because you've got the what happens on LCROSS stays on LCROSS rule, I'm sure.
Statute of limitations.
Or what happens on LCROSS crashes on the moon with LCROSS. What would be your favorite all-time prank during the LCROSS mission that you can talk about? Yeah, you got to think about that one.
I'm sorry, I blew my first one. My personal favorite was the bacon, and just pestering that.
Yeah, I ran a launch team, and for the most part, we actually pretty much stayed on track compared to some of the other projects I've worked where we went down to Florida. We had one guy one time that fell asleep while we were waiting, and we hoisted him up with a crane. But that's about the quiet.
Why do you say that so matter-of-factly? And then we just hoisted him up with a crane. Go back a minute. Explain how that came to be.
Well, there's up on the launch pads, there are a variety of cranes and other lift devices, and most of them up there are air operated because you don't want to have anything that makes sparks around rocket fuel or anything like that exploding solid rocket motors. And one of the guys, this was not on LCROSS, but prior to this, one of the guys, we were up there one time waiting for somebody to come in and install some pads, some bridges, so that we could climb over onto the spacecraft to do some work. And we weren't allowed to do that because that was owned by the launch vehicle people. So we would go up there, and sometimes we'd have to sit around for an hour or two waiting for them to show up. Well, we were up there one day, and one of the guys laid down on the soft cover that we had when we pulled over the spacecraft when it rained, because the white room leaks in the rain, and you can't have your spacecraft getting wet. So he lay down on this padded cover, and he fell asleep. So we just kind of took one of the air cranes and eased it down very quietly and hooked it onto the straps on his suit, and then real quick cranked it up in the air, and he woke up pretty quick.
Oh my goodness.
Those KSC crazy guys. Let's pop over to the other coast and talk to Emory for a moment. Emory, how about you? Were there any fun moments, even between hardware and software, where you're like, I'm going to let's flip the spacecraft around, that'll give those guys a jolt, or any moments? Let's make it go backwards. Any moments you can remember?
Well, we did a lot of training. For flight operations, you do a lot of training. They throw a lot of anomalies at you. So the anomaly guys who were figuring out what kind of anomalies that we needed to test with, they would because I wrote the software that talks to the spacecraft and knows how to get the commands up and the telemetry down and all that kind of stuff. They would actually call me on the sly and say, "How do I simulate this?" So I would kind of know what some of the anomalies were because I helped them figure out how to simulate the anomaly, and so that was kind of fun. I did get a green card at one point. One of the tests that we were doing, a card. This little card meant that I had just been declared an anomaly. That's actually up on my LCROSS blog. That's up on Facebook, and so there's a picture of the card, and it says that I've been declared an anomaly, and I had to evacuate the building on very little notice. And so somebody over in the West Coast then had to take over the software thing. The anomaly card was kind of funny. So.
What was it? Was it a
Chemical spill?
Chemical spill.
Yeah, it was a chemical. I was a victim of a chemical spill. So that was kind of fun. One of my favorite things that I remember, we did a lot of stuff with just regular audio telecons. We did a lot of our training that way. We had call-ins just constantly before we even got the voice loops up. We did a lot of meetings, just regular telecons, and a lot of the telecons the Northrop Grumman telecons, those guys would always set the telecons up so that it always asks you your name, but it doesn't actually announce who you are. So it says, please say your name and then press the pound sign. And you'd say whatever and press the pound sign, and it never played that audio back. But the NASA guys would always set up the thing so that whatever name that you put in would get announced. And Eric Drucker, who was one of our other systems engineers, he would always say, I think probably like the name of the music artist that he happened to be listening to at the time. So you'd be waiting for this telecon, and it says Emory Stagmer has joined the conference, and all of a sudden it would say, Jimi Hendrix has joined the conference. It was very strange.
Now, what's worse, whenever you hung up, it said Jimi Hendrix is now leaving the conference. And at that point, you usually had about 3 or 4 VPs and NASA higher-ups. And as much fun as that was, it was a little embarrassing at times.
One of my favorite things, and you really had to be there, was Eric wasn't comfortable in the chair. So he would stand up at his console a lot, and he'd get kind of bored and start fidgeting, and he'd be doing the Eric dance, Mm-hmm. And it's really hard to describe, but I don't think I could do it without hurting myself.
He ended up having to have back surgery, but not because of LCROSS.
Not because of LCROSS. But he was, and we were sharing video all the time. So the NASA guys had webcams on us. We had webcams on the NASA guys, and you would hear the head of NASA, Ames, walking in there and kind of cracking up at Eric, dancing behind his console.
Oh man, I wish that happened on Impact Day as well, because we're all watching the control room, with you guys in it. I would have loved to just see there's a little dance going on in the background. That would have been awesome. Let's go back to Emory for just a moment. Emory, on a more serious note, what was your favorite part of LCROSS? What's your favorite takeaway from the entire mission?
Boy, I don't know. Probably, geez, I don't know. I had my family there for both launch and impact. So that was really pretty special. The impact was pretty amazing. We had such incredible media coverage, both positive and negative. Some of it was pretty zany, and some of it was a lot of fun. But I mean, it was just the amount of coverage was really a great thing. So it was just really great to be able to share that with so many people. It's obviously opened a lot of doors for me because I've been on Spacevidcast now 4 times, I think, and it's just put me in contact with a lot of people, and it's one of the most memorable experiences of my life. I keep telling people that 2 of my goals in life are to play music with musicians who are better than I am, and to work with engineers who are smarter than me. And I worked with an awful lot of people who are smarter than me. These 3 guys and other coast here in the room, you guys are really great to work with.
Let's pop back to the other coast. And before I ask you the same question, the chat room did want me to ask you really quickly. Did you guys see the high-five fail in the?
Yes, we did. That was hilarious.
They just wanted to know, A, who was that, and B, what did you think of that?
Well, I don't think we can give you names, but I think it was more of an accident than on purpose. But
very much an accident. The guy who snubbed was needed in the mission ops room immediately, and had to book out of there. He was focused on only getting to the other room.
But
he actually has a really nice, very detailed write-up of the Science and Impact Day. His name is Mark Shirley, and on Paul Tompkins' LCROSS Flight Director's blog at blogs.nasa.gov.
Awesome. That was it was a good, just from a consumer standpoint, that was just a good. They're human too. See the rocket scientists. They're human too. All right.
We thoroughly enjoyed the Saturday Night Live version of the myth. I was just dying.
What was your favorite moment of the LCROSS mission, West Coast? What was your big takeaway from this particular mission?
Mine personally, I had my son sitting next to me on console with me, texting Emory. He might not have known who was texting him at the time, but that was just fantastic to have son next to me and experienced that with me right on console. And he was on stage with the rest of us when in front of all the news cameras and everything. So
ABC News.
you don't get to do things like that with your family very often. Share that 15 seconds of fame, right?
For me, it goes a long ways back. When I was young, about 10 years old, my dad applied for the astronaut program and got turned down because he didn't have enough test pilot flight hours at the time. And when I was, I guess about 12, 11, something like that, when Apollo 7 re-entered, he got me and my brother up very early in the morning, and we walked outside to the ball field across from our house in Navy Housing in Albany, Georgia, and watched Apollo 7 re-enter, and all lit up by the sky, by the sun as it was coming in, and watching the service module come in behind it and blow up, and the command module with the astronauts re-enter. And he and I would always share stories about the space program, and we got close to the launch. We had a chance to engrave some names on the vehicle. And I put my dad and my mom up there along with my wife and myself because of the fact that Karen put up with me working so hard and being gone so much. And my mother and my father were very important. My mom, a friend of hers, got me into the business, and my dad was the one that got me interested in the first place. And he died about 7 months after the launch, but he had a chance to be down there at the launch, and he had a chance to see the impact on the net live, and we had a chance to tell my sister saw it first and told my mom when the news report was coming on ABC News about it. So he had a chance to see that, and that for me was the high point of it. I mean, this was incredibly fun, but it's very personal as well.
That's very cool.
And finally?
Yeah, mine was very much like Jose's. My growing up in the early 60s, I had always wanted to get to the moon or be involved in the space program, and this, I can't tell you the rich feeling it was to have my name on those plates sitting up on the moon right now, granted unrecognizable. But I also got to put my family's names and my father and mother's names on, and my father passed away in February of 2009. He did not get to see the launch, but at least he knew that it was headed there. So.
One of the things that we've joked about with the folks from NASA before is that someday in the far future, if some alien civilization finds the first artifact of humans, those beat up nameplates engraved on the surface of the moon, what the heck are they going to try and figure out from that as a Rosetta Stone?
Those humans, graffiti all over everything.
All they leave behind is their trash. What is all this?
Trash and graffiti.
All right, guys, that is our show. Now, before we go, I did want to congratulate you. You recently won the Popular Mechanics 2010 what is it? Breakthrough Award for Innovation in Science
and Technology.
What she just said, and that's really cool. And you've won the Spacevidcast Award for being awesome. So that's an official award, just so you know.
It's a water bottle, actually. From
it looks like this. Here you go. This is the award right here.
Hey, it's more than I got from Popular Mechanics. Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, got the perfect thing to put it in too.
Right, I don't know if you realize it, but while we were sitting in the mission ops room, we decided that we needed some beverage holders. So we'll see if we can't get you one of the official.
I think you guys need some of these.
Anatomically
Awesome.
I think we need some of those too.
beverage koozies. It's got.
They were only used for soda originally while we were on console.
Well,
we can get one out your way.
You know, this particular mission was cool because it did have a lot of media coverage, and it was one of those things that started getting the outside of the crazy stuff, because there was a little crazy that happened too.
Astrology is still intact.
Hey, and the star people, we never found any DNA traces in the signatures, at least not that they're telling us.
Woo, thank goodness.
Cover up. It's a cover up. Conspiracy. But
Sorry, I wasn't supposed to say that.
Did destroy that hidden moon base, though.
In spite of these psychic friends trying to protect it.
Well, that's why you went up there in the first place, right? We weren't looking for water. We had to destroy the hidden moon base, and we were also trying to change the orbit. I've heard this one too. Change the orbit of the moon.
Yes, but no. Don't want the X Division looking into any of this stuff.
All right. So I did want to congratulate you guys. You guys did bring science and make it interesting to a lot of people who maybe had forgotten. And you know, a lot of people are passionate about this stuff. And you made it fun. And there was a little bit of a debate there, but you know what? It was fun, and it got people interested. And you made mainstream media, large national television, and that was awesome. I wish more space programs were able to do that. So please don't go anywhere. If you guys have a few more minutes, I've got a few more questions involving one of them, abbreviating your names in the mid-infrared about 5 seconds before impact on the cameras. So stay with us. We'll ask you that question in a moment. For everyone else, I'd like to thank you for watching live. If you're not watching live, for shame! You should watch live. It's way more fun live. You get to participate in the chat room and on the Twitters, and you can ask your questions live with the guest. It's way more awesome that way. We will actually, now that I've just told you you should watch live, we will not be live next week because the three of us, Calf right there, there you go. We'll be in Las Vegas for the Blog World Expo. And if you're going to be down in the Las Vegas area, Carrie and I show up Thursday. Calf, when do you show up? Friday? Thursday? Friday morning. So Thursday, Friday, if you'd like to meet any of us, we'd love to meet you guys at Las Vegas, Nevada. So no show next week. And we got to start telling you now because otherwise you're going to start complaining. Spacevidcast does not honor daylight savings time. We do our show at 0200 hours, coordinated universal time. If you change your clocks twice a year, if you roll your clock forward and backward for daylight savings time, the time of the show will be changing in the first week in November. So in a little less than a month, or about almost exactly a month, the show time for you will most likely be 1 hour earlier than normal. If you do not change your clocks, because this boggles people's minds, not all areas of the world actually honor daylight savings times. By the way, not all areas of the US honor daylight savings time. If you do not change your clocks, the show time does not change for you and will remain at exactly the same time that you've got it now. Now watch our website. There's a live countdown on the website that will count down to the exact time of the show, and we'll continue to remind you for the remainder of the shows up until the daylight savings time change. I'd like to thank you all for watching us. Stay with us. Post-show is next.
It's time to look up. In 1969, in 1970, our journey. We've never.
That's Earth-like planet, we think.
You know, we should miss more shows.
Yeah, I mean, just, major scientific discoveries. And for this week, actually, it's the anniversary of LCROSS. It feels like it just happened last month. For those who don't remember, that was the mission where we bombed the moon. Okay, well, whatever. That's at least that's how the media had it coming out. And we are joined on both coasts by some of the LCROSS team. We're joined both on the West Coast by...
Oh, I actually closed that.
Really? I was like, be prepared for this.
I know.
Get ready to go.
So sorry.
We're joined on the East Coast by Emory Stagmer. Hopefully I still pronounced that correctly. And on the West Coast by...
We've got Jim Munger, Craig Elder, and Jose Cabinallas.
And Vax, just to help us out, repasted it in my iPad. Hey guys, welcome to Spacevidcast. Thank you for joining us.
Glad to be here.
So let's start off with, for those who don't remember, what was LRO and what was LCROSS? What was that mission a year ago? Let's start with the hardware guys on the West Coast.
All right, I'm Craig Elder. I was the electrical lead during the design and development process. The LRO spacecraft, Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, was the Moon's version of Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, intended to map out lunar resources in many different spectra, laser altimeter, surface penetrating radar, optical camera, all sorts of good stuff. Trouble was, it was a little too big for its initial rocket. When it switched to the next biggest rocket, the Atlas.
In 1969, a group of astronauts changed the world. They walked on the moon.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
In 1972, our journey ended. We've never been back. 2010 begins a year of change. Private companies are working on next-generation spaceships. Governments are looking to go back to the moon and on to Mars. It's time to look up and dream again. It's time to push humans into the cosmos. It's time to educate and engage the planet. It's time for Spacevidcast.
This is Spacevidcast 3.33 for Friday, October 8th, 2010. My name is Benjamin Higginbotham. With me, as always, the beautiful, lovely, wonderful, and talented Carrie Ann Higginbotham will be your hosts for this evening. And what an evening we have got. Let me think. We missed last week's show, and during that time, basically, we found a planet.
And if you look real closely at it, you can see in the shadows, various things that had been troubling us, like the batteries that had sprayed on us and all sorts of other stuff like that, which was really just fascinating and absolutely wonderful, because that was the one thing that we couldn't rehearse and the one thing we couldn't plan for. And it was the one thing that had to work, or else we were going to have to go to the backup plan real quick, which didn't involve us doing much of anything past that point.
Wait. What was the back? You had a backup plan? How do you have a backup plan to impacting the moon? The backup plan is don't hit the moon? What?
No, actually, the backup plan is the spacecraft just carries the stage and crashes along with it, and you have to kind of look at it from other things. You can't get the real good close-up pictures that we got.
Our success criteria was crashing into the moon and discovering water, not necessarily taking the pictures ourselves.
So you set your bar really low, right? What are we going to do?
What?
We're going to crash into the moon. That's pretty easy. We don't
Oh,
need
no.
That was the minimum set.
It's better than that, because the way that they structured the mission, the whole idea was that it was supposed to be cheap enough that it could fail. And we had to, as we got further into it, we were kind of saying, that really is not a good guiding theory for how you're going to build and fly the spacecraft. So we started taking it a lot more serious as time went on.
We were Class D when we started out, and then we weren't Class D anymore by the time we started getting close to the moon.
Yeah.
I'm going to pop over to the East Coast for a second and talk to Emory, because Emory, you've talked to us about this before, about the different classifications.
Plus 5, there was an extra 1,000 kilograms of throw weight headed towards the moon. Hence was born LCROSS back in February of 2006. Shall I keep going, Ben?
Oh yeah, no, keep going. We're all about all about you guys.
All right. Well, not to bore your audience, but the proposal was actually pretty entertaining. There were 19 different teams, government industry teams, competing for this one slot, how to use the 1,000 kilograms headed to the moon. There were little rovers. There were some guys in Texas, I think, had a drill that would try to drill down through to try to find water. Along comes the NASA Ames Northrop Grumman team, and we decided to cheat. We said, gee, in addition to the 1,000 kilograms that we want, there's this 2,000 kilogram Centaur upper stage rocket that's just going to be space junk if we don't do something with it. How about we use that as a kinetic impactor? Turned out to be Jose has the paper version.
And props. We have props.
Yeah,
This model is actually more important than you realize.
Yeah, we'll get into the importance of that in a little bit.
This part right here is the stage, and this part right here is the LCROSS.
Part of the magic of
That's the business end of it.
LCROSS beating out the other 18 candidates was that we figured out a way not only to cheat on the mass that we were carrying, but we also figured out that we could turn a piece of the Centaur's auxiliary structure, the secondary payload adapter ring. We figured out that we could turn that into a free-flying camera platform, not only to guide the spacecraft into the Cabinallas crater, but also then to observe the impact and then create a second crater up there.
And you guys were pretty much looking for water, correct?
Yes.
Very much so. Actually, ice, because at 395 degrees Fahrenheit below zero, it's not really water at that point.
Fair enough.
We were going to a place where there are places on the north and south pole of the moon that never get sunlight in the craters. And that's where they had these radar signatures that looked kind of like ice. And that's where they wanted to go and drop something in there and see what they could bring up.
And talk to me about Impact Day, because you guys, you go there and then there was a stage SEP, and you send down the impactor first, right? Because you're blowing the crater in the moon, and then you're getting all the ejections going, and then you're sending LCROSS down after it to get the readings, right?
Right.
So how did that all go?
Actually, it went exactly as planned. The stage itself separated the. Let's see, where is it? That part of it right there. The stage itself separated just perfectly, and after it happened, they turned the cameras on the spacecraft and swung the spacecraft around, and all of a sudden on the TV screens that are beamed down from orbit, you're seeing this little image of the rocket stage drifting away,